like they used to. Can't place your bets on the 9 to 5. Things don't work like they used to. No, there's not enough to keep you alive.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a returning guest, his third appearance on the show. It's the third year of him appearing on the show. His name is Dr. Randy Overbeck. He is a former college professor, retired teacher, podcaster, and most importantly for this conversation, he is a professional author. Welcome back, Randy. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. A little froggy in the throat from allergy issues, but other than that, I'm doing great.
Would you get hay fever?
Well, it's too early in this country for hay fever, but I definitely get hay fever, yeah. I have the good fortune of being allergic to most every tree that buds, so it's big time here.
Yes, it's the worst. I really struggle with it myself. Sometimes I take these really tiny pills called antihistamine.
Yeah,
if you have them in this. Yeah. And it's the for anyone who's never used them, they are the smallest ever pill. But if you take more than one, it will knock you out. Like you're gone.
Exactly right.
It's incredible stuff. But I'm quite stubborn, so I won't take it until I absolutely have to, like where I'm sort of sneezing.
Same way.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's like, maybe it's an upbringing thing, but I've always been like, unless I'm damn near dying, I don't want to take pills. Like I've been having some pain lately, and I'm like, okay, I'll take the pills, and they work because I didn't take them in the past. So it's like, okay, but that's the danger as well, getting reliant on them as well. You got to be really careful with that. Anyway, as I said in the preamble, 3 years consecutively of you appearing on the show, 1 year after another. This is your third appearance on the show. Let's talk a little bit about the year since you last appeared on the show. I've done a lot of changes here on the podcast. We've switched from being a Zoom podcast to a Riverside podcast. But what's changed for you in the last year since your last
good many
appearance?
things. Some in professional life, some personal. The perhaps most interesting, last year we talked about my sixth novel, which was launched almost a year ago, about 10 months ago, by the small press that have published most of my books, called Wild Rose Press. Small press in New York that has about 500 authors and publishes a whole lot of genres, but mine have been primarily mysteries or paranormal mysteries. It's called Red Shadows of Saugatuck. Has done very well. It turned out to win 3 more national awards since we talked last time, including Mystery of the Year last year. So I'm very proud of that. But I've always wanted to try for the next rung on the ladder, which for those of you that don't know, that's a major publishing house. To do that, you have to get an agent. And that's what happened last year, this time in June. Last year in June, I was fortunate enough to pitch my newest idea to actually 9 different agents at a conference. 8 of them were interested. 3 of them made offers to me, and I selected one of the agents. And within a month and a half, the agent sold my book. So it's been a whirlwind, and that book will be published in 3 weeks.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that book in a bit. But first, I want to talk about how you approach pitching. We've been talking about this a little bit on the podcast recently.
Yeah.
And it's quite a nerve-wracking experience, a room full of people, and you've got to pitch, this work, your creative baby. It's like, you know what I mean? Because sometimes people can be brutal with their criticism. So walk me through your pitch when you're pitching your book.
Well, I've been to several different conferences, and pitching is done differently at different conferences. So The conference I've been attending most often is one called Killer Nashville. It's located obviously in Nashville, and it's focused primarily around mystery thrillers.
Of
There's
course.
some
Yeah.
horror, that's where the killer part comes from. Their pitching is very different. Their pitching is actually a little less stressful in terms of preparation, but can be just as brutal. So their pitch is you have to read your first 2 pages aloud in front of a group of 8 or 10 authors and editors or publishers or agents. And then they tell you whether it's worth anything or not, or send me something or not. That has been, that's been trying at times. But it's always been enlightening. And what happens when I walk away from that pitch arrangement is I often walk away with an insight I didn't have about those 2 pages. And the reason they do 2 pages is because that's what an agent will give you about, maybe. If they pick up your book and read it. If the first 2 pages doesn't do it, they're not going farther.
What have you been learning about those 2 pages you've been pitching then?
Well,
what's your takeaway?
You have to figure out, first of all, it forces you as an author to figure out where to start your story. So you can't have this nice, flowery, let's get into this. You can't have this person looking in the mirror and saying, you have to find some way to do what it's called in the drama world in media res, which means you start in the middle of things. You just kind of drop the reader right into the action at the very beginning of the story. Bam. So that by the time you finish 2 pages, you want the reader, well, in this case, the agent, to go, okay, give me more. That's not enough. What's next? What happens next?
Now, this is interesting because the television show or movie equivalent would be, at television, I don't know what they call it in the movies, but you call it a cold open, right? Now, I understand that mindset, throwing people right into the action. Great. However, as an author, as a creative, you must kind of get the feeling I get, which is kind of like, hold on, I have to cater the beginning of my book to what your expectation is, what will, sell more, I guess, hook people in, as opposed to my creative vision for it.
There is a compromise. No question there's a compromise involved there, but I don't think one has to be sacrificed to do the other. In my news book, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is about a secret spy in the Revolutionary War, I don't think I sacrificed what I wanted for the creative vision, but the reader is dropped in the middle of a very tense scene that immediately drags them into the action of oh my God, what's going on here? So I don't think it's one or the other. I think you can fashion your creative vision. First of all, Christian, I'm a realist. Okay, if I make something that I want and nobody reads it, well, that's not really what I'm looking for. So I have to find some place in the middle that I'm happy with what I produce, and that readers will have some interest in reading.
Yeah, I get that. It's just I think it's a little bit of a shame that it has to go down like that, Although, I'll say this, there is the ability to release like a second version and a third version, and that's kind of the joy of reselling, I suppose. When the book does well, it wins awards, and then the publisher or yourself kind of suggests like, well, why don't I post this? There's more content there. There's, stuff that's been cut. Same as the movies when you have special features. So yeah, I don't know. I just, as a creative, as a writer, I look at that a bit like, that's a shame. Sometimes stories do start slow, quiet. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Depends.
But if you think about really great writers, even great classical writers, they usually found a way to have an opening that immediately drew the reader in. Think of Dickens. It was the worst of time. It was the best of time. From A Tale of Two Cities. I think you can do both. I think you can maintain your creative vision and find a way to hook the reader. Now, hooking here means different for different genres. When I say drop in the middle of action, for a romance, that's not the same as a murder mystery. So there's all kinds of ways of dropping the reader so that they have to kind of like get their feet on the ground and start running when they're reading the book. I think there are different ways to do that.
I don't know if I've asked you this, but when I was thinking about your pitch and, obviously the way that you draw people in with those first 2 pages, I can hear from your voice that you've got like that kind of classic audiobooks like voice, which is fantastic. Like I love that. You can hear that it would sound good for a book, maybe even a children's book as well. There's that element to it. No, I mean that with all respect. Like some of the best books I ever read or listened to with the audiobooks were children's books, and there's this kind of like a warm feeling about it, right? I don't know if I've asked you this, but have you recorded audiobooks?
No, I've not. I've looked at the possibility of doing that. In fact, with my newest book that we're going to talk about in a little bit, the publisher came to me and said, this is a mainstream publisher, and said, do you want to record your book? Well, I don't have the equipment. I don't have any of the resources. I don't have any of that. Not to mention, it's a very time-intensive process.
That's the thing.
And for me, here's my fear, Christian. When I get a book right, I might rewrite that book. I think I talked earlier on this podcast about my 14 different first chapters. Didn't I share that with you? So in the first book in the series, Haunted Shore Mystery Series, the first chapter was actually rewritten 14 different times until I was satisfied I got it right. So I'm afraid that if I went down the yellow brick road of the audio book, I'd end up going, oh no, I didn't like the way I did that. Let's do that again. And it would be, it would be hard to satisfy me. I think that's kind of what my problem is.
No, that's a fair point. I'd never thought about it like that.
And just so I make it clear so that I don't mislead your readers, in Killer Nashville, if a writer is uncomfortable reading their own work, the agent will read it for him. Well, actually, the agent does it. The agent has an assistant that will read it for him. Kind of, it's somebody set by the conference. So, and there are authors who go, no, I can't read it. I can't read it. You read it. But for me, if I'm going to pitch my work, I'm going, no, I'm reading it.
It's a lot. I remember going through scripts recently because I've started script writing for the first time in my life, and this other guy that was there gave his opinion, and it was a space like that where it was open, but he almost kind of like mocked. I didn't say anything, but he mocked it as far as like he basically said like, oh, have you ever written a script before? And I was like, no, I literally said that like 10 minutes ago. And he was like, oh yeah, you can tell. And I was like, that's kind of rude. I get what you're saying. That's kind of rude, Yep. Just a little bit. But anyway, obviously in that sphere that you're talking about, it's kind of expected. Just a final question.
Okay, but let's go back to your original question. So when I pitch, that's not the normal pitch. The normal pitch is what happened in, I went to the conference is called Thriller Fest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically about the same kinds of books, action, adventure, mystery, thrillers, all that kind of stuff. And it's in New York City. So it attracts a lot of agents. Killer Nashville, you probably have an opportunity to pitch to maybe eight agents and editors, maybe 10 if you're very lucky. In Thriller Fest, they had probably 25. They had a ton. And they have a thing that you, of course, pay extra for. Everything costs more money, called Pitch Fest. And in Pitch Fest, you line up and you, you have 3 minutes to pitch to the person that you're pitching to, period. And when you sit down, they put on a little timer. Boop.
And you've got to do this in front of, I don't know, possibly hundreds of other authors.
So you're not in front of everybody, but everybody's in this big room. In fact, you're hearing everybody else pitch at the same time. Jesus. And this gal, most of them are women. Well, there are a couple guys, but most of them are women. Have to focus on what you're telling them, and go, okay. Occasionally, now I did that to 9. So you have how long did we have? 2 hours, I think. 2 hours, and then you have to stand in line and wait your turn. To go up. And when you get up there, you sit down and go, "Hi, my name is Randy Overbeck. My book is, and what kind of genre it is," and then that's it. And then you launch into your pitch. So you have to make sure that pitch is razor sharp. You realize that you're only going to, and actually you don't have 3 minutes. their recommendation is you should have the pitch done in about 90 seconds so that if the agent wants to ask something, there's time in that 3 minutes said, well, what about this? Or how did you, which in fact did happen. And I think I had it down to about, wasn't 90, but it was close to that. Probably 100 seconds, 110 seconds, under 2 minutes. And I was very, very fortunate. Several of the agents said, when I got done, they said, okay, tell me more. Is it a series? And actually, I was at several of the stations longer than 3 minutes, which I'm sure the people in front of me going, get your ass out of the chair and move. It's my turn. It is a very harrowing experience, but I've been through a lot of pitches. It used to be I was just tied up in knots trying to do this, but now I'm going, hey, I'm giving it my best shot. If they like me, fine. If not, and I was very, very fortunate, Christian, because the company that published my other books, the small press, would take the new one in a heartbeat. There wasn't any question. They like my work so much. If I send it to them, they'll take it. So I had a backup plan anyway, but I wanted to get to the big boys, and this is the step you have to go through to get to them.
How do you deal with criticism in a space like that? Because obviously, I know you're prepped for it. I know you've got a thick skin, but how do you deal with it?
Well, I think you just move on. Well, in this case, in the first example that I told you about the 2 minutes, there is some significant, I like this is not very good, or this drew me out of the story, or whatever the criticism is. In this case, when you're actually pitching it, when you're actually doing your, what we call the elevator pitch, you know what that means, right? You're stuck in the elevator with Steven Spielberg, and you got until it gets to the 11th floor to, so there's not really a lot of time for them to, I don't think so. They just, and I want to be very kind here, because the vast majority of agents that I've pitched have been kind. Even if they don't like it, they're kind. They will say, it's not for me. That's not the kind of thing I do. I think you have a good idea, but I'm not sure that it will work, or some of the agents that have passed on me before have used euphemisms, I think, because they would say things like, I don't know who I'd sell that book to on my paranormal mystery, Mm-hmm. And I'm going, well, how about people who like paranormal or people like mystery? But again, nobody, I have never had an experience with an agent or an editor who literally crushes you. I've had plenty of no's, but a lot more no's than yeses, but the no's have not been horrendous from a personal point of view.
I guess I'm
from
just
a professional point of view. Yes.
Yeah, I guess it's just because I've seen so many of those TV shows over the years where they just tear people apart. Things like America's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent, X Factor. Like, I hate those shows, just on a side note, but the way they talk to people sometimes, I'm like, you could have said that in a more respectful way. You didn't have to destroy them. Do you know what I mean? Like in the author's kind of realm, it would be like the equivalent of turning around to beat someone and being like, yeah, you should stop writing. You should never write again. And it's like, come on, man. Like, it's good. It's good to hear they're respectful. That's good to hear.
Well, and like they're probably some of their worst criticisms are things like, I don't think you're ready yet. You've got a good idea, but from what you're telling me, it's not there. Or
reasonable.
I'm not seeing this. It's just not coming alive for me. Which is a little bit like what I was saying before about for the 2 pages. You better grab that person right away. I've been told that an agent gives a new manuscript or an acquisition author, either one of them, 90 seconds.
Crazy.
And it's in, or I read some more, or it's out, or I read some more. That's the option.
So given that you've been in a lot of these spaces, obviously you've seen a lot of other people pitch, what would you say are the most common mistakes people make, or the things you should avoid in a pitch?
Well, I think that the most common mistakes that I've seen are really 2 kinds. One is that the author did not do enough research to make sure that this agent or editor wants this kind of work. So I've made a mistake myself too, although I try to be pretty careful about who I'm pitching to. There was one of the 9 that was the case. All the conferences give you pretty decent information on the agents. And what I do is if every agent, so I had identified, let's see, I pitched to 9. I think I may have had like 11 in my notes. I don't remember. I didn't quite get everybody, but I got to almost everybody. And every one of those, I had gone to their website. I had checked what were their interests in. If they had information, I checked to see if, okay, in my case, I'm pitching historical suspense and thriller. So I wanted to see, have they agented historical suspense or thriller, that kind of stuff. So I think the number one mistake is they're just pitching everybody. My book's so good, everybody will want it. Well, no, it doesn't make any difference how good your book is. If they're not doing that genre, they're not going to pick the book up. It might be the next Harry Potter, but if it's not what they're looking for, they're not really going to go there. The second one is they haven't carefully prepared enough. I mean, you really have to stand in front of the mirror. There you go. Ready? Clock. 90 seconds. Let's do this.
It does make you wonder, like, how many potentially incredible books are out there that we've just missed out on because a publisher didn't believe in it, you know?
I'm sure we would be stunned. Well, you know, Harry Potter was turned down by,
so many people. So many.
You know, I think of the other way. I'm thinking, now imagine if you were the last agent that turned down Harry Potter.
Same as like the people that didn't sign the Beatles. I wonder like how they slept at night. I'd just be like, no.
These guys will be a flash in the pan. What's the big deal here? Yeah. But I'm so to finish up our conversation of how did we get from last year to here. So last June I do this pitch. I actually was lucky. Not accidentally, but I ended up pitching an acquisition editor. So for those that don't know, okay, you have to go through an agent, and then the agent pitches to a company, a publisher. The person they pitch in the company is called an acquisition editor. The editor in charge of which books do we buy, which books do we don't buy. And it was an accident on my part on my list that I happened to have an acquisition editor listed in my agent category. And I noticed when I had free time, meaning I can't get in this line yet, and there was nobody in front of let's give the gals her name is Tori Kirkpatrick, and nobody's in front of her. And I looked at my list and I went, she's on my list. Okay. I went over there to her and I pitched it to her. And I did my little pitch. It was American Revolution, fictional story of the spy that we know very little about, blah, blah, blah. And she went, that is really interesting. She said, do you have an agent? I said, no, that's what I'm here. Not yet. She said, if you have an agent, have the agent contact me. I think we might be interested in that book. She's the acquisition editor for Diversion Books, which is distributed by Simon and Schuster. I didn't know all those details at that point. So eventually, I go back and finish my pitching, and I pitched to, like I said, 9 agents, 8 accepted, 8 requested partial or full manuscripts. Of the 8, 3 of them got back to me. 3 of them wanted to represent me. I selected the one that I did, a lady named Ellen Scordato from Stone Song Agency. Within a month, she's got the manuscript. We did some minor changes, trimming, sent it out. Within a month later, the book is sold to this lady, Tori Kirkpatrick, who I met at the conference.
That's a really quick turnaround. That's incredible.
It's an amazing turnaround. And Tori Kirkpatrick told me, I didn't know any of this. I had never heard of Diversion Books, although I've learned since it's a very well-known, well-respected imprint. But they have, up until recently, only done nonfiction books. And they were branching out into fiction. And she said, we might use yours to launch our fiction or historical fiction. I'm going, okay, well, that's what's happening. So it's really exciting on my end because, and everybody's been good to work with. It's been really nice. Plus, because here in America, we're celebrating our 250th anniversary birthday next in July. So I don't know, you probably know this because of all the podcasts you do, but the normal turnaround with a major publisher is 18 months when they buy it to when it comes out. In my case, they accelerated all of it, so it was 9 months.
Wow.
Which meant, of course, it was a lot harder work on my part because everything had to be returned, revised, sent back, edited back, that kind of stuff much more quickly. Like they normally give you a month to read what they had butchered, when they do their editing and decide what's okay and what's not okay. I had 10 days, so it was crunch time, but it's well worth it. I'm thrilled with the final product. It's, and my book was too long, this is until they made me cut words and stuff.
So based on what you just said there, I think a part of you is like, I don't agree with that, but that's just the way it is. So, we do what we have to, but you're like,
well, okay. What happened was some of the things that they had changed, I accepted. Others, I stood pat and said, nope, that's staying in the book. I'm not taking that out. I do have a really weird experience that you would appreciate. So, my book, my manuscript's not a book yet at this point. It's a manuscript. They used an AI editor on it.
Oh,
and it turned out to be, I was the beta test. Oh God, what a horrible experience.
Did they let you know beforehand that they were going to do that?
Yes. First of all, they said it was an AI editor working with a person. Okay. Well, what I realized happened was that the person, the actual human editor, did like the first 30 pages, maybe. And then the AI editor took off from there. And the AI editor did all kinds of weird stuff. So I'll give you just one example if people are writers, they'll understand this. And if you're a good reader, know this. I tend to, I tend to deliberately use complex structures in my sentences. Okay. They're not all simple sentences and stuff. The AI editor put all these semicolons in the manuscript. And if you're a regular reader, you will notice that in fiction, you almost never, ever see a semicolon. They use colons. You almost never see a colon. I at one point I got mad at the editing person that I was working with and said, first of all, I taught English for years. I know how to edit.
Yeah.
And if I have a sentence fragment, it is not because I don't realize it's a sentence fragment. It's what I wanted in that spot. So that was kind of a difficult process. And it was also difficult because the way the AI program has set that up, I couldn't simply revert. I actually had to rewrite. I knew what I had to, I kept an old version of what was up on my screen and the AI version. And then I went, no, I got to go back to the old, but I had to actually rewrite the old version back in. I couldn't just say, revert that back.
It's like this program I told you about that I use for the podcast now, Riverside. So it's a full disclosure. I've said this before. I have strong opinions when it comes to AI. I think it should be used as a tool, not as a thing that you use to create things, but we'll get to that in a second. I do have a question for you about that. But what I will say is, as a tool, it can be quite useful, but there are problems, and I guess it depends on the software you're using. The Riverside AI doesn't seem to learn your style. So like in mine, it will frequently say, oh, you should delete this section because it appears to be behind the scenes talk and this is not relevant for the podcast or whatever. And I get that, but my show is quite casual in like how the conversation goes, right? And B, it's always at the end of the show and it's not behind the scenes. You can tell the difference. I mean, it's just saying goodbyes, really. This is neither here nor there. AI is getting better over time, but I think that's kind of wild that they use that for your book, because it I don't think it really necessarily understands like how authors write in a different way as well. Like, I'm sure there were things in there that said like, oh, you should shorten this so that it's just, yeah. And it's like, well, some things have to be explained because it's a novel and that's what you do. If it was nonfiction, I'd be like, all right, maybe, but.
Well, I remember one of the publisher's primary goal was to shorten the manuscript.
Of course. Okay? Yes, I understand that.
So I'm sure that was something that was built into the AI program.
Okay.
But here's an example of the weird way that it went about shortening it. So in my manuscript, my novel, I have two POVs. Okay. I have the American teacher who becomes a spy. And then I have a British officer who's very formal. Okay. He's very polished, very, well respected. In his language and in his POV, he never used contractions because it's not appropriate for his position. And in the woman, in Abigail's POV, she did. For some reason, the AI decided to put all these contractions into the other character's name is Parker, into Parker's POV. I'm going, so I'm assuming because it saved a word here or there. I don't really know why it chose to do that. And before I finish, there are a few things that AI was good at. I will admit right here on this podcast, I am a horrible typist. It is a very a laborious process for me. It's difficult and I do work really hard, but it is not uncommon that I have left a space here or there, or the period is in the wrong place, or, comma. It was very good at those things, at finding the place that was missing. And I told him that. I said, and I actually gave him when I'm done, I gave him this big, long scripted thing that says, here are 5 things that the AI program seemed to do well. Here are 12 things that it screwed up in the process. and I told them, cost me at least 24 extra hours to be able to fix what the AI program had screwed up.
Wow.
They said, I'm not sure we're going to use this again with another author. I said, well, don't use it until you fix whatever the problem is.
Yeah, because there are certainly advantages to using a system like that. But again, I think we're a few years off before it's at the point where it's sophisticated enough to understand, oh, this is just the way this particular character talks, or, etc.
Yeah, right.
Not quite there.
And I think now it's not my job. I'm not on that side of the publishing, but if I were doing it, I'd have somebody on their end go over it after the AI did it. After the AI did his stuff. Now they would probably say
something
that
like that.
Purpose.
If you've got like a big book, I think you need at least like 2 or 3 editors just to kind of go through things. Because the important thing to think about as well is that people are going to look for different things. And that's kind of the advantage of having human editors. Can't believe I have to say that.
More than one eye.
Yeah, exactly. But AI is unless you have like a different program, it's just always going to look for the same things unless you tell it to look for something else. So you still have to prompt it, which is like, yes, I know it speeds up the process, but also to get it where you want it, you probably need to just look at it yourself. Really, it's one of them. I do have one more AI question before we deep dive into your book. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on AI books and the use of AI in writing. It's a very controversial topic now, just the usage of AI in the arts, in music, in film, etc. I've always been very opinionated on the topic. My current stance is fine as a tool, but to be honest, and unacceptable as a main source of creation. I think it's fair to use it in, like, okay, if you're talking music, I think it's okay if it's not the main source of creativity. But if you're literally just sitting there telling me like, oh, I typed a prompt into ChatGPT and now it's written me a book, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. That's why would anyone want to read that? There is an argument because there's a lot of non-fiction books churning out stuff right now from AI, and it's quite quick to do it, but I feel uncomfortable with the idea of people earning money off the back of that, because no effort's gone in. But what say you? What say you?
Well, AI? I mean, let's start off with the number one problem. And the number one problem is that the companies that have put these AI programs together, whether they admit to it or not, they've pirated all this information they used to train the AI. John Grisham testified in front of Congress and said, look, you're welcome to use my books. Movie people use my books, but they pay to do that. They don't just take the book and then, hey, I'm going to make a movie out. He said using books to train AI is no different than using books to make a movie out of it. It's my intellectual property. So where I start from is they should never have been allowed to do all of this without going to everyone and say, hey, we'll give you X. That's the first problem. The other problem is that I think what we'll end up getting is something very derivative. When I think of authors that I really love, it's because of how they're able to come up with incredibly new ways. Let me give you an example. So one of my favorite authors is William Kent Kruger. If you haven't read him, you should read him. He's a best-selling series called the Cork O'Connor Mysteries. I think he's in the 23rd one is coming out this summer. And they're all very interesting mysteries. They take place generally in northern Minnesota. It's a storytelling area that's not been used a lot. That's really interesting. But what I find fascinating, he does a better job than any author I've ever known of capturing the scene in poetic language. And what I look to his books, every time I see his new books, he comes up with new ways of describing the sky and the lake and the woods and everything that makes the book so moving. Well, an AI isn't going to do that. It's going to copy what was done before, and it's going to end up churning out books. No offense here, James Patterson, but it's going to end up turning out books like the books that are the 25th, 28th, 30th, 50th, 100th book of what James Patterson did, because it's all done on a formula. Oh, this goes first, then this happens, and this happens. I don't use AI. Well, I use AI sometimes for research. I use AI sometimes to nail down a particular fact, although I will be honest, as I was writing this book, and I'm actually in the middle of writing the sequel right now, I have found AI to be in error about 1 out of every 3 times. So that's the other hidden problem, is that, like I'm writing a scene and I'll ask, well, when did this particular character, his name is Robert Townsend, when did Robert Townsend do such and such? And the AI will throw something up on there, and I type back and go, no, that's not right. And then it'll type back and say, oh, thank you for the correction. No, that is not right. I'm going, great. So now I'm training their AI. That's pretty much summarizes the way I think AI. And I think it's great for people to use AI in that manner. I see that no different than using Google. We've used Google for 20 years. What happened in 1776? Give me the 5 major things. Well, we used to look that up anyway. AI just makes it a little shorter route to get the same information.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think I literally spoke about this on the show that I just released today. The problem is people now are just using AI instead of doing research. It's like, oh no, just do this for me. I don't need to do anything. And of course you don't learn, because obviously the difference before is, you would have looked those things up And then now you've got a basis for an essay or a book where you can start off of that, but then you still have to do your research, deep dive into it, etc. But I digress. You could talk all day about AI. We're not here to talk about AI all day because I'll just get angry, to be honest. I don't like the way it's being used.
And I have, not a score, maybe 15 books that I've read or read part of or pulled part of. So I have all this information before I go to AI, because when I go to AI, I'm looking for like a tiny particular thing. And that's how come. And because I have the background, I knew it was wrong. I'm going, no, that you have the wrong war. Didn't happen in that battle. That's a different battle, But if you don't have that background, you don't really know.
It's crazy that it has essentially the access to the entire internet and everything that's ever been put on there, and yet it will get things confused and give you the wrong information. And it's like, and that's why when you go on Google, you see, generative AI, it's not 100% accurate. And it's like, well, what's the point of using it then?
Yeah, right.
I want accuracy, but I digress. Now, it's always an honor to have an author on the show. It's always a massive honor when they send me their book. I have it here. It's an advanced copy. It did. Thank you so much. Real pleasure. It's called Abigail Trench. It's your latest book. It's upcoming. It's dropping in a couple of weeks in June, and I'll make sure the show is ahead of that. So there we go. Abigail Trench, a novel of Washington's spy ring. What can you tell us about this book, Randy, that you haven't already told us?
The book centers around the Culper Ring, which most people, even in America, don't know the Culper Ring. So, partway into the war, George Washington organized the Culper Ring to help find out the secrets behind enemy lines of what was going on. And in those days, being a spy was not what we think of today. Being a spy was it was just one step above being a murderer. So especially to British people, it was a smear on their honor. So those people involved in that business, there are 6 men and 1 woman, they kept that secret with them to the grave, most of them. In fact, here in America, we did not know the identity of the 6th man, until 1930. That's how long it took, and we were able to do that by matching a historical expert matched handwriting analyses. And we have never been able to establish the identity of the woman. We have references in letters and in dispatches to what they called the agent was 355. But there's no name, there's no background. So what I did is I created a fictional character to step into those shoes. And I explained at the very beginning that my book is fiction. It is not nonfiction. It is not history, even though all the pieces of the story are drawn from actual historical events. But my character's participation in those, we know from what little references we have to 355, some of the secrets that she helped uncover. So I wove those secrets into the story of the book and created a character that I thought might be there.
Is this the first time that you've done this? That you've sort of taken?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like a historical background and things that have happened, but then obviously creating a fiction within that. That's quite.
Yes, I mean, each of my mysteries were generally drawn from a historical example. So in Blood on the Chesapeake, the first of the Haunted Shore mysteries is about a lynching. Okay. So when I created my murder lynching, I actually used the particulars from the lynching that occurred in that same place some 20 years earlier than my story takes place. So I've stolen from history before to craft my novel, but not anywhere near to the extent of this one. In this one, I work very carefully to weave in things that we know happen, like the attempted assassination on George Washington, like the hanging of Thomas Hickney, like Nathan's Hale execution. I weaved in things that are part of the American, Benedict Arnold's treachery. Those kinds of things are woven into it, but it's all told from a fictional character's point of view.
Why did you decide to write this particular book?
The story of Abigail Trench, or to be more exact, the story of Agent 355 has fascinated me ever since I stumbled upon the Culper Ring, started reading about the Culper Ring. I've read pretty much all the books that have been published about the Culper Ring. And I thought, so what little they knew about the Culper Ring, at least according to historical experts, is that this woman had to have access to British officers' secrets. They had to have some way of getting that information through the message pipeline stuff. So, and many historians don't agree on who she was, even what class that she belonged to, any of those. There's kind of like different point of view. So what I did, remember, I'm an educator. So my hero is a teacher, but in those days, most teachers were actually tutors. So what I do is I have her stumble into becoming a tutor in the family of a important British officer's house. And by accident, actually, ended up hearing the secrets that are going on in the house while she's tutoring the two children. I thought it was something that a teacher would do. I thought it was a reasonable thing for that kind of character to do. And the way she reacts is very heroic, which is part of my goal in portraying people who have that profession of, her concern always from the very beginning, even when her life is threatened in the middle, is about the children. What's going to happen to the kids if this happens, if this happens? That's important to me.
It's always an exciting thing as well when you've finished and written a book, you've spent many, many weeks, months, in this case, nearly years, like 18 months, and it's gone down to 9 months, and it's a long process as you put out there, but you're already writing a sequel and this book's not even released yet. Walk me through that feeling, what that feels like. And clearly you're very excited about, just delving into the story more.
Well, when I wrote this book, originally, I really didn't think much beyond Abigail Trench. I'm going, okay, got to do this. And as soon as the agents started talking to me about it, they said, this is a series, because publishers are more interested on whether it's a series or not. Because if readers like one, they'll probably buy two, that kind of thing. So I went, well, how could I do? So what I ended up doing was, and then let me kind of cut to the chase. When this publisher, Diversion Books, bought the book, they not only bought this book and gave me an advance, their contract gives first dibs on the second book. They didn't make a 2-book deal yet. That's what my agent was trying for. But if this book works, we want the second book. So I started immediately. Well, not immediately. I started in January of this year working on the second book. Now, this is a different kind of series because each book will focus on a different member of the Culper Ring series.
I've only ever sort of asked the question I'm about to ask, I think one time, and it was years ago, and it was more, I think I might have even asked yourself, it was to do with self-publishing and stuff like that. But basically, I just want to understand a little bit more about the business side of things. So you said there that they purchase the book, right? Now,
the rights book, yeah, right.
Right. And I would understand that to mean the rights to distribute it, sell it on your behalf. But for argument's sake, I walk into a store or I go online and I purchase this book. Like, do you get a cut from every book that is sold, or like how does that work exactly?
Well, I don't really know. Well, I have to calculate what my cut is going to be in this particular book, but the answer is yes.
Okay, cool.
Let me use my previous books because they're sold and I know what. So the previous books sell anywhere from $19 to the newest one is $23 because of inflation. Out of that amount, I get about less than $2.
Oh my God.
And I will get a little less than that this time because an agent will get 15% of what I would have gotten. Now, the hope is I'm with a bigger publisher. They've got a bigger footprint. They've got more resources. So there will be more sales. Therefore, there's more money. Even the big guys only make a small amount out of, like James Patterson only makes a little bit. But when you sell millions and millions of books, it doesn't matter that you only make $1, $1.25, $1.75, $2 on a book because you're selling millions of them. I'm not going to sell millions of copies about a historical thriller.
You never know.
Well,
I mean, I'll say this. Every time an author, especially has been on my show and they've spoken about a particular book, series, whatever, in my head, sometimes I can already see like, oh, this could be a series. This could be a film. And in some instances, they've turned around and been like, yeah, we're working on the documentary, we're working on the film. It's like, I knew it. But anyway, oh God, it just seems tremendously unfair. I get it. I get your point. It's like, well, this gets it out there. There's always the opportunity for things to grow. And it's like, if you wouldn't go for a deal like that, then it's just not going to get out there. And that's, to me, it sounds very much like old music contracts, being that, the record label makes all the money. But it just seems so unfair. So I guess my next question is, are there opportunities to earn, outside of book sales, things like, signings? I don't know how that works. Like,
you don't make any money. So, I mean, children, the exception is children authors. So when I ran school districts, we had children authors often come to the district. And I had conversations with them about, well, my librarian did all the work and she invited me to lunch. So I got a chance to talk to several really famous children's authors. And they said they made much more money from I think we paid them, I don't know, $5,000, $3,000 for the whole week to come and talk to kids. Said they made a lot more money from the appearances than they ever made from their books. And I was surprised at that. Now, but and I'm sure if you're a big name that they might be paying you to come to the signing. In this case, my publisher said, I don't care if you do any signings or not. They don't really gain much of anything. I said, really? So, and I've limited my signings very strategically. I live in Ohio, in a place right in the southern part of Ohio. And I'm actually in a town that's kind of halfway between Dayton, and Cincinnati. So there's one book signing in Dayton and there's one book signing in Cincinnati, and that's all I'm doing. And so you'll appreciate this. The bookstore, let me give them a plug. So the Cincinnati one, and both of neither one of them are the big, are big, chains. So the Cincinnati one is a company called Joseph Beth Book. I think they have 2 or 3 stores. That's all. And the other one is called Books and Company, and they're part of the Books A Million family, which also doesn't have that many stores. Anyway, both of them expect me to drive people to their stores to buy the books. They will not drive traffic there. Now they're going to put my name up, and they'll publicize it. And it'll be on their website, and they're going to do social media and all that kind of stuff. But I've learned long ago when I first started this, I thought if you had a book signing and people like this kind of genre, they'd come to see the book signing. Nope. They don't have a reason. They don't know the author. Nobody's showing up just because they're interested. You really have to generate that interest.
So you're really doing this for the love of writing then?
Yeah. Well, I learned a long time ago I wasn't going to make any money at this. That's, and I think hidden in your question, which I thought I heard was, well, wouldn't you do better if you were self-publishing? And the answer from a financial point of view is true. That there's question. I have self-publishing friends, authors that have self-published, and from a financial point of view, at least in terms of what they make per book, they do much better. the $19 book, they probably make $10 on something like that. Depends on their, who else. The difference is I didn't want to go through all that. I didn't want to be responsible for doing everything, set the book up, blah, blah, blah. I want to concentrate on writing, although I've learned you can't do that. You got to concentrate on marketing just as well, which I've learned. I'm okay with that. You have to kind of, and the only reason anybody would do this is because they love what writing. The response I get back from my readers is what keeps me going. Okay, I'll do another book. Right.
I will say this though. There's a few things I want to elaborate on there, because it sounds like we're just dissing the publisher at this point. No, I think your share could be higher. I'll say that. I think it should be higher, because you're the author. But that's I'll just leave that there.
I agree.
You spelled it out very, very well, which is that obviously the more books you sell, the better. Like I just quickly calculated just there, and it was an easy sum. I'm terrible at maths. Let's say you sold like 100,000 books at $2. That's 200,000. So there is obviously the more you sell, the better it's going to be. The other side, which I think is important to stress, is those self-publishers, they have to do everything themselves. From the distribution, getting the books made, getting them put out and published and released physically and online. Whereas you've got a team taking care of that for you. And that's a big part of this. Because obviously, it's professionalism, isn't it? I believe it or not, I have books self-published. Can you buy them? No, you used to be able to. Can you get physical copies? No, because I don't have someone to distribute that for me, right? I could go down that route, but then, as we've outlined in previous shows, you have to go through a lot to get there, to get that opportunity. So I can see it both ways. As much as it sucks from a creative standpoint, I can see the benefits of that.
Well, and it's what the author is either willing to put up with or wanting to do, or and I will agree that having this publisher, whether it's Wild Rose Press for my earlier books or Diversion books for this new one, having them look at my work and giving me feedback on what they think could be done is definitely helpful. It definitely gives me another set of eyes that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I think makes the book better. As long as you stand your ground and you don't end up giving up important part of your manuscript, I think you actually put out a better book. One of my constant complaints is that too many self-published authors haven't had eyes, and they publish stuff that isn't ready to be published or shouldn't have seen the light of day in the first place, or needs more, whatever. So it kind of smears that whole avenue. Although there are other authors that do a remarkable job, and have even gone on to be published by major publishers after they've put out a really great book.
Have you shared the book with anyone else yet? Have you got like feedback aside from the sphere of publishers and editors and such? Meaning,
who do you mean by
it could be friends, family, anyone that you have shared books with previously?
Oh, yeah. So I think I mentioned this before. I have a very complicated process that I use before the book ever sees anybody else. So I have a set of beta readers that read the book in process.
Okay.
There's about a dozen. And they give me feedback so I give them to the book at about a third of the way through, 2/3 of the way through, and then all the way through. And they have a set of questions that they respond to me, and they tell me whether it's working and this is working or not. And okay, so that's my first one. Then I belong to a writers group that they examine chapter by chapter, not the whole book, but enough of it so I can kind of fix what's wrong in there. And that's before this ever gets to anybody professional. Then I have a diagnostic editor who looks at the book as a whole and gives me her feedback. And she's fantastic. And she will say, you hit the ball out of the park, but here are 2 or 3 places where you struck out. And she'll show me places in the novel that could be strengthened. I go through all of that. before it ever goes to an agent or a publisher or anybody else. And then, as we just mentioned, the publisher gives me their feedback on what they think would make it stronger or better or shorter or tighter, whatever words or whatever language they want to use.
I'm really interested in your response to this next question. Where do you think this book ranks within your collection of books? All the books you've ever written, where does this rank?
I think this is the best work I've done. Like most things, the more you work, the better you get. But this is my writing on a different sphere, because in the past, research has always been a big part of what I do in terms of my books. Because in addition to writing a good murder mystery, and I need to be fair, and writing a fair murder mystery, other people write better murder mysteries than I do, but mine are good, but not great. But what is great about mine and the research that drives mine is the research about the location, about the lure of the town or the area that this takes place, the research about the social issue that's connected to the murder. Like in the last book, it was about the MMIW, missing and murdered Indigenous women. So all of that research is all part of my process as I am putting the fabric of the novel together. So doing the research that's a very natural process for me. So when I jumped over to this historical sphere, even though the research demands were much greater, because everything about the book has to be researched. I had to research, what do their clothes look like? What do the streets smell like? They have this huge fire that happened in New York City in September of 1776 that burned down about somewhere between a third and a half of the entire town. So, and that's part of the story of the book. What was that like? Why did it keep burning? Why didn't they put the fire out? All of those things. What kind of person was Nathan Hale? Nathan Hale was the man hung for being a spy for George Washington, for your listeners that may not remember. And we know what his personality was like. And he had a particular scar on the one side of his face that made him kind of a tough guy look, even though he was really a mild guy. Anyway, all of those things had to be meticulously researched so they could be woven into the historical fiction that I was creating. That's, I think, what elevates this book to the next level.
I love the answer as well, because you said what I expected you to say, but you were honest too. I think whenever I say the same with the podcast. I'm like, people ask, where should you start? I say the latest episode. Work your way backwards. I can pick out certain ones and be like, this stood out to me in the first year or the second year or third year. But ideally, any artist, any creative, whatever, would say their best work is their most recent work, because it's the most advanced version of their work. It's where you're at now. And obviously there's always arguments like, oh, well, this era was better, or this book was better, or so on and so forth. And I think at the end of the day, it's all a matter of opinion. I mean, going back to what you said before, your own perception of your own writing. I mean, it's all just subjective. It's all what people think, I
mean, I would say that I can find examples of, I think most authors get better as they go, but I can think of examples of authors that have gotten to the point where it becomes kind of like rote, and the later books are not as good as some earlier books. But generally, you get better as you practice.
There's also that thing as well where sometimes writers, musicians, whatever, sort of become a parody of themselves. They start like writing to appeal to the audience and what they're expecting, rather than just writing what works for them. I've had similar criticisms about people say I should be niche. People say I should only focus on certain types of things. And, like just the other day, I mean, granted the person was being just a bit mean, but online, surprise, surprise. But they said like, oh, why don't you only focus on interviewing musicians? And I'm like, I didn't actually get the chance to fully answer, but because it'd be boring, to be honest. And I love music, I love musicians, but if I only got to interview like one particular type of person, it really restricts the conversations I can have. And the whole point of this podcast is to interview people, hear about their projects, hear their life stories, you know, stuff like that. When you think of like the most successful podcast out there, Joe Rogan Experience, he interviews people from all backgrounds. And this person that was arguing with me was like, oh yeah, but you know, he started in MMA. And I'm like, yeah, but then what happened? He branched out and became more successful because there's more of a universal appeal. He didn't stop doing the MMA stuff. He just did a separate show for that. And it's like, that's what you should do. You know, if I had more time, I would certainly think about doing another show about something else and zero in on something. But again, when you're working, you know, it is what it is. You know, you gotta, like, unfortunately, I would love for this to be my career, but we're not quite there yet.
I think people who don't do what you and I do with, as far as a podcast, they completely underestimate what it takes to put something together. That they pick up and go, oh, well, that was nice. They don't understand it took hours to get that 20 minutes, half hour, 40 minutes, whatever segment delivered to them.
And talking podcasts, it's been about a year since you started up Great Stories about great storytellers. You were kind enough to give me a chance to do a little plug on one of your shows, so thank you very much for that. That was fun. It was exciting for me. It was a first for me. According to your website, and this is really exciting, your podcast ranks among the top 50% of podcasts in the US. That's amazing. What did it mean to achieve that?
It stunned me when I got that info. That was part of the report when I got the analytical report on the podcast that I received at the end of 25 that said that it was in the top 50%. I think part of it has to do with longevity. This is actually, believe it or not, this past month I dropped the 52nd. So it's I'm in the 5th year of the podcast. So, cause I do one episode a month, every month, right around the month. So I just dropped and part of it, I think, is I've found a niche that is not out there. You know? And I tell stories about storytellers, and I tell stuff. So I just finished one. My most recent one is on Isaac Asimov, who's one of the 3 fathers of modern science fiction. And his story is a fascinating story about what he was able to accomplish, and his quirks in terms of who he was as a person and how that affected what he did. So I think, and that's what I do on every podcast. On the one you sponsored, you know, that I try to find some interesting aspect of that person's life that people have not, they've heard of him. They might even have read their books, but I didn't know that, you know. If they haven't listened to the one on J.K. Rowling, they may be stunned to find out that, you know, she was a single mom writing this manuscript, and her ex-husband stole the manuscript from her and tried to sell it. And,
didn't know that.
You know, wow. So I try to dig for those kinds of things on every author or poet or director that I do. And I think it resonates, or at least it's starting to resonate with people. So I'm pretty thrilled about that.
And obviously, as you mentioned before, it sounds like you've kind of gained an appreciation for how tough podcasting actually is. What have you learned about podcasting in the last year?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I heads off to you, because so far my podcasts are only audio, which you know, and I've been getting comments from other people saying, you know, you need to go video. Go ahead, so I'm trying to decide. But again, that will take even more time. So
I consider this a free plug for Riverside. I got to say, look, for a program I only switched to within the last year. I can't remember exactly when I made the switch, but honestly, it's a game changer. The AI function, as much as it pains me to say it, is really helpful. Like, I use it entirely for clips and for the show editing and stuff. And I still go through it and comb it and just make sure it's there and everything. But it makes those clips for you. And if you're going to do a video version, I think it's good because it gives you what it thinks the audience will be most interested in. You can edit everything from like how you crop things, just fixing the audio, just everything, you know. And yeah, to drive traffic towards what you're doing, it's good for that. I will say it's made no difference for me as far as clips are concerned, because I did clips for like 4 years, I think, because the show's been going 6 years. So I did it for 4 years. I stopped doing it because of just how much time it took, and it just wasn't going anywhere. And then I didn't do it for like a year, and then people were like, "Oh, you should be doing clips." And I'm like, I did it for 4 years. And I was like, wait, well, if I'm going to do it again, let's try something I've not done before. Let's use this Riverside program. Let's use the AI. Let's see. Made the switch, saved a bit of money from doing that as well, from going away from Zoom and getting rid of a video editor in favor of, audio editor in favor of having a video editor and this. And honestly, yeah, real game changer. It's taken a lot less stress off my plate. Yeah, man. I mean, look, this should be fun as much as possible. Like sometimes there are laborious things, you know, like you mentioned it with writing a book and editing, like it's just part of the process, you know? But that being said, you can streamline things a bit and still make it a somewhat enjoyable experience. Like one thing I really like about going back and editing the podcast is that I can listen back over things and be like, yeah, that was a great podcast. That was a great show. And the AI has figured out what maybe some of the better conversations were. And it's just like, great, fantastic. Moving it forwards, about your podcasts, what's been the main feedback you've been getting about the show? Good and bad, just anything.
Well, I think one of the things that people really like is the podcasts are all short, so they can. It's their podcast. Each episode's 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 11 minutes, something like that. So they can. It's a quick listen, which they kind of enjoy. There's usually humor involved in some aspect of it, or kind of a quirky kind of humor. I've gotten good comments on my podcast voice, but lots of people go, you know, you have a great voice for podcasts. I never really thought of it that way. So that's kind of a nice.
You do. I like I said, I mean, I understand. I don't do audiobooks for this reason because of just like how long it would take. Side note. So I'm a voice actor as well, etc. Right. And I apply for stuff every day or audition every day. I always turn down audiobooks, and people have said, oh, but your voice would be great for this. It'd be good for this. And you know what? They're probably right. But when you've got to do 8,000 pages in some cases, I'm like, I don't want to do that. And no amount of money. And unless you're going to pay me like $1 million or big figures, I'm not doing it. Right. Because if it was for a lot of money, I'd be like, you know what? I'll do it. I'll just take 3 months off and I'll do it. Right.
Yeah, the problem is, the pay is for the audio version is pretty similar to what it is for the author. It's like,
yeah, it's. I mean, I had a wonderful woman on the show years ago called Nancy Peterson who does it for a living, and the one thing I got from that conversation is that she's adjusted everything to do that, but it is a lot on her. Like it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of time. It's you deep dive into it. It's like with you and your writing. Like you've clearly, every time you've got a book, you're like, right, writing this book, we're committing with this, however long it takes, editing, publishing, etc. I'm there for the full journey. And it's only really till the end that you start kind of reaping the rewards of that. So you have to love it. Podcast, you know, number one reason people ask me, if you ask me why I do this show, I do it because I love it. Like I want to see it succeed one day, if that's ever going to happen. But even if it doesn't, know that I always did this because I love to interview people. I love podcasting. I love hearing stories and telling stories. That's the main reason above all else. So,
and that's as it should be. That I do my podcast. Yes, it's all part of my platform. Yes, it's part of a way to get the word out. But I do it because I think finding these authors or directors and finding what people don't know about them and telling that story makes them a more human person it's more than just a name on the page. It's, oh, really? So, that's fun. That's the fun part for me, and it's another form of writing, different from yours. Mine is all scripted ahead of time. So everything has to be written in advance of when I give the podcast. So I have pages. So it's also keeps sharpening my writing skills to make sure it's tight, make sure I don't have extra blah, 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 blah built in, because people don't want that. So that's an advantage as well.
All right, a couple of final questions for you, Randy, to round off the show, completely unrelated to today's show. You know what's coming, but hey, it'd be interesting to see if they're different from last time. And there's a new question in there that I've only started asking people in the last year. So Let's have some fun with this. What's the worst advice you've ever received?
The worst advice as an author? What's the worst advice I've ever received?
Doesn't have to be as an author. Could just be anything in life. First thing that comes to mind.
The worst advice as an author that I've ever received was like, you should give this up. You're never gonna achieve anything. It's too hard. The whole thing is too hard. Don't commit your time doing this.
Let me ask you this, just as a follow-up before you continue. That person that said that to you, are they a published author?
They're an agent.
All right. What was their reasoning behind that?
He didn't think I had the chops to be able to. Well, I want to be fair. He didn't think my writing was good enough. That's definitely part of it. He didn't think that where I was going there was enough readers to make it worthwhile. You have to go where the audience is, all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to write what I wanted to write. He said, well, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And I guess in response to what that bad advice I got, I kind of steered halfway. So I try to make sure that what I have in there is interesting. Now, here's a perfect example. I know going in that there is not the built-in audience for a historical thriller that there is for mystery. Mysteries are much larger. Mysteries are second only to romance in terms of the number of readers that are out there, and histories are pretty far down the list. So I don't expect to find the as wide a range for the historical thriller that I do for the mysteries. But I love the whole aspect of the history part. So that's why I went ahead and did that anyway. And I'm hoping by going with a major publisher, I might negate the numbers game. We'll see. I don't know.
I wish you the best of luck with it. What's the best advice you've ever received?
What's the best advice I ever received? Going back to my education process, when I was working for my PhD, if people don't know that, it's a grueling, difficult process. I don't know if who would care about this statistic, but 99% of everybody who starts in a PhD program does not finish.
Jesus.
So the numbers are even worse than the NFL. It's hard, and it is very grueling. And I was 2/3 of the way through, having put a lot of money into this, seeing a huge dissertation in front of me, and I'm working full time and part of this. And one of my professors, and I'm doubting, is this going to pay off? Is it worth it? I got to sacrifice time with my family to get all this done. One of the best advice, he said, look, I have confidence in you. We had already talked about in the group about 99% not finishing. It's called ABD, all but dissertation. So he said, you'll get across the finish line. You have the determination and the stamina to get this thing done. So don't doubt yourself. Don't look back. Just keep moving forward. And that's what I did. And that's for everything.
Thanks for sharing, man. I appreciate that. I think I know the answer to this next question, but I still want to ask, just in case. Obviously, off the back of what you just said, you're a doctor, man. I introduced you as a doctor, both previous times. I think I did on the first one. I don't know. I don't recall. Did I? Okay.
I think you did, yes.
So how come you don't use the title on your books or, when you're advertising online?
That's a very good question. Now, if you see my website, you'll see a reference to doctor, but it's not headlined. And I have discussed this with both publishers both times. In fact, and the discussion was even greater because this is a historical book as opposed to a mystery. The response of the publisher before said, it makes no difference. You want to put it on there, it's okay. It's probably not going to help. Nobody's going to read a book. Nobody's going to read a mystery because a doctor is in front of the name. That's just not a draw. With the history, it's a little different. And their advice, which I agreed to, was that if they thought they feared the doctor would mislead people in this sense. As I said before, this is not a historical piece of scholarship. This is not historical scholarship about the time. I deliberately play with places and dates and facts as part of my fiction, even though it is largely grounded in historical reality. They were afraid the doctor would tend to lead people to believe that it was more history than less fiction.
I hate to say it, but I agree. I feel like having your doctorate on there might stand against you, and I think it's silly because it's your title, it's who you are, but at the same time, like I can see that the book in front of me, and it literally says it's a novel, but there was the decision to put that there to make sure people know it's a novel and it's not.
Right.
But then there's other things, like if you go to the shop, it's going to be in the non-fiction, so the fiction section. You go online, it's going to be on the fiction section, but it's I don't know. Interesting.
Well, some people get a doctorate and everything they ever do says doctor this, doctor that, doctor this, doctor that. That's not why I got the doctorate. It's not what I do with the doctorate. The doctorate gave me research and educational skills and backgrounds I didn't have before. That's what I want. In my opinion, I'm still benefiting from what I learned then in my writing life now. So, because much of the research skills I honed during my PhD time is what I use and adapt for my fiction in order to make sure that it's accurate and as much as I can to the point. And what I generally tell, like as I mentioned to you earlier, I do a lot of speaking. I've got, you'll appreciate this. So I've got a gig going I think I have 25 scheduled so far in the next couple of months. It's called 5 Reasons We Won the American Revolution. And it's not what you learned in school, and they're not what you learned in school. And I give 5 different reasons and one of those reasons has to do with the Culper Ring that most people don't know about. Anyway, they always say, well, how do I introduce you? And my answer is, the very first time you introduce me, you can call me Dr. Randy. And then from then on, it's just Randy. And that fits my personality. It fits kind of how I interact with my participants and stuff. And I'm comfortable with that.
Well, it's just interesting as well. Like in our conversations, it started off doctor, and you were like, yes, and you'd sign off as Randy, and you say I'm Randy, and I'm like, okay, I'll call you Randy. There's a bit like, is this disrespectful? I don't know. I'm going to go with how you react, and it's okay. Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, like I just had a professor from my university that I used to attend years ago on the show, and I always called him by his first name because that's how he introduced himself. I can't recall if I called him professor. I do remember there were times at uni when I would say professor, doctor, etc. And it was interesting to see, I call it like I say it, who had an ego and who didn't. Because some people would be like, you must call me this. And other people were like, eh. And Ailson's his name. I really get the impression he doesn't care either way. It's there, but like, so what? It's just interesting. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far, Randy?
Oh, the biggest life lesson. The biggest life lesson probably has to do with family. If you follow me, you probably know family is really important to me. I just came back from 9 days with my immediate extended family, a 3-day cruise, and I just spent 2 days in Universal with my 22 and 19-year-old grandchildren. It's wonderful, but I'm exhausted.
I can imagine.
And in 2 more days, I leave for 4 days to spend with my 5 brothers. So I'm one of 7 brothers. We talked about this before. My oldest brother's passed, so there are 6 of us left. So we get together every 6 months or so. So family is very important to me. And I think the most important life lesson is that, you can't let small hurts or anything get in the way of maintaining the relationship with those people that are closest to you, who you love. And most important, today, just this week, I lost a really important friend of mine, a few years older, died of Parkinson's. And his death reminds me that you don't get these times back. I really did not have the time to spend 2 days in Universal. I should be home working on propping up everything for the book, but I realized I wasn't going to get that time back with my grandchildren. That we weren't going to have another chance where we get to hang out and just talk about everything for 2 days, or waiting forever in line. Oh my God. For the roller coasters.
What if the relationship is one-sided?
Yeah, we have a problem of that in my extended family as well. I think my answer is you still keep trying to reach out. Doesn't mean it's reciprocated. It doesn't mean, but you keep letting the other party know. In this case, in my family, it's a father to a son. I'm here for you. When you're ready, I'm going to be here for you. I love you. I might not appreciate what you're doing or how you're acting now. That doesn't diminish the fact that I love you. And I guess the most important thing is, if you keep the door open, if you let the person that is in your family, that you know that you still love them, even though you don't love what they're doing or the choices they're making at the time, that is still the right thing for you to do, even if it doesn't produce the change that you hope that would happen. You should be able to show love to those people, even if that love is never responded, even if, children aren't always, and parents, but it works both ways. Sometimes they're a pain in the ass. I get it, and I don't pretend that I'm right. I'm just, that's my lived experience. I don't have other people's families, so I don't really know. And I know of people who have families that are so horrible that they can't be with them because they're afraid they'll bring them down. And I respect that.
That is a hard one. I agree with your sentiments about keeping the door open. It's something that I've really struggled with over the years. In as much as, like, when it is one-sided, I'm like, well, why am I making this effort when I'm just not getting anything back? Or what I'm getting back is not what I'd hoped. And, I think it's a fair point to say, like, well, still leaving the door open. And, I don't think I'd ever be the sort of person who would shut the door unless it's like this person has done something unforgivable. Thank you for that insight, that advice. I appreciate it. Thank you. And third appearance on the show. It's been a pleasure having you back, Randy. Excited. I really think this book's going to do well for you. This is an interesting departure from what you normally do. It's almost a step into the unknown, but you've done your research. You've really gone for this. I really hope it works out for you really well. And yeah, just real pleasure having you on the show as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's amazing. We've had 3 different conversations, and every one of them is different and have all kinds of things to talk about. So wish you the best.
Till the next time. And for all the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, I'll make sure to provide links to how you can find Randy online and purchase his books. And as we're speaking, I'm going to probably release this episode next week. So it will be, I guess, a couple of weeks before the book is released. When do you have an official date?
June 9.
June 9th. There we go. So look out for that. Abigail Trench, Randy Overbeck, June 9th. To all the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I did. And as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Things don't work like they used to. Can't place your bets on the 9 to 5. Things don't work like they used to. No, there's not enough to keep you alive.